Bible, Ezekiel.
Okay, we ended up in Ezekiel 39 with the last verse in that chapter being there's an outpouring of the Spirit. So we've gone through once again the common theme that we see throughout the prophets of the words that come against the sinful people, the judgments that are on their way, the devastation that's going to come, and then the prophecies of renewal, and then the actual prophecies of how there'll be a complete restoration. And that's what we're seeing here through the book of Ezekiel. And we've come to that final stage in this prophesying. And we come to chapter 40. And 40 through the end of the book seems to be related to what's called the millennial age, which a lot of people believe through some of the things that are in the scriptures that there'll be 1,000 years where Jesus will reign on the earth as king over all the nations. There'll be a subduing of the nations to the will of God, basically. Some people relate that the scriptures that talk about the glory, the knowledge of the glory of the Lord will cover the earth as the waters cover the sea, would refer to that time. I don't know all of that for sure, but anyway, it seems like these last chapters seem to be delving into that millennial time, that age of the king's reign, the Messiah's reign upon the earth. And so it starts with a vision of the temple, and it's a temple whose the chronology of it being of the time that it's in and the measurements of its size and that kind of thing don't fit the temple that was built when when Judah came back from Babylon. There was a rebuilt temple during the time of Ezra and Nehemiah. This doesn't seem to fit those dimensions, so this seems to be a different temple. And so there's a description of that. There's a detailed description of those measurements and all of that kind of thing, the chambers of the temple, that kind of thing. So you can read through that. I'd encourage you to read through that. I'm not going to spend a lot of time, not much at all, in this section of Scripture. There's a famous vision that happens in chapter 43, the vision of the glory filling the temple. Well, here, this is the completion of the story of the prophecies of Ezekiel, because in Ezekiel chapter 10, we saw the vision of the glory leaving the temple. And now we're seeing a complete restoration. By the time we get to chapter 43, we see the vision of the glory filling the temple. And so in chapter 43, verse 3, it says, "And it was like the appearance of the vision which I saw, like the vision which I saw when he came to destroy the city." So it's kind of the same thing going on here. He's seeing similar visions of the time when the glory was leaving the temple. Now he's seeing the glory coming back. And he says it reminds him of the visions of that time. It says, "And the visions were like the vision which I saw by the river Chebar, and I fell on my face." And so once again, he's just overwhelmed, just like he was in the beginning when he saw those visions and he first began to prophesy. And says, "And the Spirit lifted me up and brought me into the inner court, and behold, the glory of the Lord filled the house." So here we see the kind of the culmination, the restoration. I want you to be able to see this. I think it's a common theme, and I think we have to set our hearts and our minds on this, is God desires to have mercy. When he revealed his name, he said he's full of mercy. He's full of loving kindness, full of the Hebrew word chesed, or whatever. You got to kind of, somebody says it's like you got a cockroach in your throat trying to get it out. But anyway, loving kindness, mercy, God is full of it. So his delight is in having mercy. Otherwise, he would have just created man sins, he blows us all up and said, that was fun. But, his delight is in having mercy. So even in these horrific situations and these things when whole groups turn on him, the people that he's chosen for his own name turn against him. He still has a heart to restore them, and his heart is a heart of mercy. And so we see that theme being worked out here in Ezekiel, just like it is in the other prophets. And now we've got the glory coming back to this new temple that's built, and the glory filling the temple again. We go on, there's talk about the gate for the prince. There's a gate, the eastern gate. Talked about there a lot of different interpretations of what that's pertaining to and how that fits. But want to look there once again. We see there the emphasis in chapter 44, verse 4 here. "Then he brought me by the way of the north gate to the front of the house, and I looked, and behold, the glory of the Lord filled the house of the Lord, and I fell on my face." That just seems to be the common thing with Ezekiel. It's just like, man, he's just up and down all the time. When you look the kind of impact that he sees when the glory of the Lord comes, when he's having these visions, he's just fallen down a lot. We see that, of course, in the book of Revelation when John, sees the Lord in his glory, and he's down on his face, and he has to be, picked up. So, common theme throughout like that. Here the glory of the Lord's filling the temple. There's, once again, ordinances that are given for the Levites, proportioning the land, offerings, designations for all those kind of things are given throughout this. And so a lot of detail there, a lot of speculation about this. A lot of these things in Ezekiel 40 through 48 fit other scenarios of what we consider themes about the millennium. Some of them are a little bit different. Like in Revelation it says there'll be no need for the temple because the Lord will be the temple. Here, all of a sudden there's a temple. And so people talk about whether that's making a distinguishing thing between a heavenly Jerusalem and an earthly Jerusalem before the new Jerusalem, and whether there's an earthly part of it and a heavenly part of it. And so I don't know all of that. You can read this, you can figure it out, you can do a little study on that. We're not going to cover a lot of this in depth at all. I don't consider it a strength of mine in looking in this. There's other people that do. So you can go to them. There's another famous vision there in chapter 47, and it's the water coming out of the temple. And this once again is alluded to in the book of Revelation. Much of Ezekiel is alluded to in Revelation. As when we get into Daniel, same thing. There's so many common things here. I just want to share just a bit about that. As the water comes out, and it says when it's coming out of the temple, it's ankle deep, and then it's knee deep and waist deep, and then you can swim in it and whatever. And then in verse 12 of chapter 47, it says, "And by the river on its banks, on one side and the other, will grow all kinds of trees for food. Their leaves will not wither, and their fruit will not fail. They will bear every month, because their waters flow from the sanctuary, and their fruit will be for food, and their leaves for healing." And so that's a theme that's also in the book of Revelation, the water coming out from the throne and the trees on either side, fruit trees, and their leaves are for the healing of the nations. I came from a town where actually there was a little pamphlet that was put out on a regular basis recording the healings of many people, and there was testimonies in there, and they called the actual pamphlet, they called it the Leaves of Healing. And so that has a kind of a historic ring to me, and family background, and reading our church newsletter was called the Leaves of Healing, so because of all the healings that were recorded in the early days. So we go on to chapter 48, the last chapter of Ezekiel, and a lot more things, specific things are laid out. It's got here portions that are be given of land, proportioned out for the different tribes, for all that kind of thing. And to me, what comes interesting at the end, when we get to the very end of it, it says, verse 35, "The city will be 18,000 cubits round about, and the name of the city from that day shall be The Lord is There." That's the compound name of God, Jehovah Shammah. Now, what we look through, and so here what we find is that there's a description of the city. The city's gigantic, bigger than the natural Jerusalem is at this point. And it says, in that day there'll be the culmination of history as the Lord dwells among his people. He comes and he calls it the Lord is there. Just like he was in the Garden of Eden, the Lord was there. And so we get to the end of Ezekiel, the curse is ended, the people of God restored, the Lord is there. And we finish with this last, really I think it's probably the last time a compound name like that is used for the Lord, Jehovah something. We saw early on in Genesis, Jehovah Jireh, the Lord my provider. Exodus, the Lord my healer. Jehovah Rapha, the Lord my banner. Jehovah Nisi, then Jehovah, what was it? Shalom, the Lord's my peace. The Lord my shepherd. Rahat, Sidkenu, righteousness, the Lord of hosts. Sabaoth, Jehovah Sabaoth, the Lord of hosts. And it ends here with the very end of Ezekiel summing up all of this, and it kind of sums up the whole message of the Bible is that the restoration is complete and the Lord is dwelling among his people. He will tabernacle among them, it talks about in the book of Revelation, and we see that this restoration as it's wrapped up in the book of Ezekiel, finishing with, and the Lord is there. Jehovah's there. He's in our midst. He's among us again.